I'm Randy McDonald. I am the supervising attorney at the post-conviction clinic at Arizona State University School of Law. Yeah, so post-conviction relief is, I guess, as the term implies, anything legal that a criminal defendant can do to attack his or her conviction after it is final. So it's any legal thing that is happening after the conviction is final. So we do a number of different things. We represent criminal defendants in parole hearings. We do sort of post-conviction appeals. We help people file applications for commutation. And now with the help of the Arizona Justice Project and the grant we received from the state of Arizona, we are helping people go back and expunge marijuana convictions that became final many years ago. I think the type of case that people might be most familiar with is like a DNA type case. So after DNA technology became more prevalent, a lot of prisoners and criminal defendants began going back and testing biological samples that were collected but were unable to be tested, and discovered that, in fact, the DNA profiles that were found in these cases didn't match them. And so they would file a post-conviction relief petition with the court to say, look, I found this new evidence. This DNA test shows that I am not the person who committed this crime, so my conviction should be overturned. And so I think that the most prevalent types of post-conviction cases that we're most familiar with are DNA cases where DNA results have exonerated someone. But it doesn't have to be DNA testing. It could be any kind of new evidence. It could be a change in the law. It could be evidence of a constitutional violation. For instance, if we discovered that the prosecutor had withheld evidence from the defense that could have helped the defense, that could entitle someone to post-conviction relief. So that when we say post-conviction appeals, that's kind of the archetypal example. But I think another type of post-conviction relief that people might be familiar with is, parole. People who have, for instance, a sentence of life with the possibility of parole get parole hearings in Arizona. Once you're certified, you get the hearings every 6 months to a year. And that is a form of post-conviction relief because you're asking the parole board, even though you have a life sentence, to release you under certain terms. So post-conviction sort of is a bunch of things. It is sort of the umbrella term that we use to describe any kind of legal relief that you're seeking after the conviction becomes final. So an appeal is something that happens right after the conviction, and it happens as of right. So in most American jurisdictions, you have an automatic right to an appeal before your conviction becomes final. And in an appeal, you can challenge sort of legal issues that had to do with the trial. So for instance, you can say, oh, this evidence shouldn't have been admitted against me at trial. Or you can say, oh, this particular jury instruction was wrong and it didn't correctly describe the offense. So when you're looking at an appeal, you're basically reading the transcript of a trial and you're looking for errors that happened at trial. Whereas a post-conviction petition involves any type of new evidence. You can bring in any kind of claim that wasn't necessarily part of the original trial. And so that's why newly discovered evidence is kind of the archetype of a post-conviction petition. The vast majority of our clients are individuals who are incarcerated in Arizona's prison system. We do have very few folks that we have helped who have either served their sentence or are in the federal prison system. But anyone who has a criminal conviction could access the help of the post-conviction clinic. We typically partner with the Arizona Justice Project, who does a lot of the intake of our cases. So, people write to the Justice Project, and the Justice Project will refer to us cases that seem like they would benefit from some of our investigation. Yeah, so we operate in within the Arizona State University Law School. So I'm an attorney, and there is one other attorney who works with the clinic. But other than that, everyone who does work for the clinic is a law student. And so the clinical education program here at ASU there's a number of components. There's a civil litigation clinic, there's an immigration clinic, and there is the post-conviction clinic. And so it is a clinic in the sense that we are providing clinical education or hands-on education to students, and those students are providing legal services for people in the community. So the Arizona Justice Project was founded several years ago, I want to say at the very beginning of the 21st century. And it was one of the very first state-level innocence projects. So I think a lot of people are familiar with the Innocence Project, which is the nationwide project that sort of seeks to overturn wrongful convictions. The Arizona Justice Project is a project like that, but it operates exclusively in Arizona. And it doesn't only take on cases of innocence, but cases of what we call manifest injustice. So lengthy sentences, juvenile offenders, cases where perhaps innocence and guilt isn't being contested, but the Arizona Justice Project thinks that there's some sort of injustice that has occurred, and they want to represent the defendant. So the clinic came about because about 2008 or 2009, the United States Congress created a grant. It's called a Bloodsworth grant, named after Kirk Bloodsworth, who is the very first death row inmate who was exonerated using DNA technology. This grant funded programs that would investigate post-conviction claims of innocence using DNA technology. And so the Justice Project was awarded one of these very first grants, and using that grant, founded the post-conviction clinic at ASU Law School. There are many clinics like ours at law schools across the country, but like the Innocence Project, many of these clinics are geared toward proving claims of innocence. In other words, they only take cases where the clients claim that they are innocent of the crime charged. The post-conviction clinic is a little bit different in that we do take innocence cases. We do try and overturn wrongful convictions, but we also take many cases in which we think there's been a manifest injustice. So for instance, we've represented folks who have terminal illnesses trying to get commutations or clemency. We represent folks who were juveniles when they committed their offenses and are in prison for the rest of their lives. We represent them in parole hearings and in post-conviction proceedings. And now we represent folks who have marijuana convictions who, by expunging those convictions, are able to go back and seek resentencings to get out of prison earlier than they otherwise would have. So I'm the supervising attorney. I work here full time, and I supervise the rest of the staff and the students who work at the clinic. There's another attorney who works with us part-time, Joey Dormady, who is in the administration here at ASU and also helps me to supervise some of the cases. We have a legal fellow that is funded by the Prop 207 grant that we received, Andy Humphreys, and she is a recent law graduate and soon to be an attorney. In fact, she should be barred within a few days here, we hope. And she is helping us by basically overseeing all of the marijuana expungement related litigation that our students are working on. And then there are the students themselves. So in any given semester, we have 10 to 15 students who are working with us on various cases. Each student will be assigned their own caseload. They'll be responsible for investigating the cases, for drafting any documents related to the cases, for speaking to the clients, for developing any legal strategy. And every week, the clinic meets in case rounds. And so we all sit around and we talk about the cases and we talk about strategies for, how to move the cases forward. So I think the biggest impact that we've had is for people who are seeking either clemency or parole. So we've represented a number of people who committed offenses when they were juveniles, and we've represented them at parole hearings, and a number of them have been paroled and are now out in the community and are really thriving. We know that by and large, people who commit criminal offenses as juveniles are much, much less likely to reoffend than people who commit offenses later in life. And so we have helped a number of those folks get parole and sort of reintegrate back into the community. And what that means is representing them at the parole hearing, helping them by putting together release plans for them, helping them do the things that they need when they get back out into the community. So I think that is really, I think, one of the things that I'm most proud of working at the clinic. And, like I mentioned before, these are folks who don't have claims of innocence, who definitely committed the offenses, but they did so when they were 15, 16, 17 years old. And like I said, we know that people who commit offenses at that age are very likely to be able to, turn their lives around. And I think I've seen that with all of our clients. We have focused on representing individuals who are incarcerated in Arizona prisons who have sentences that are enhanced by prior marijuana convictions. So in Arizona, when you commit a criminal offense, if you have historical prior criminal offenses, the state can lengthen your sentence because you're a repetitive offender, in other words. So what we have been doing is we've been finding folks who have longer sentences because of previous marijuana convictions. We've been expunging those convictions, and we've been getting back into court and asking courts to re-sentence these folks so that their sentences can be shorter. And we've had a lot of success with that. And we have helped a number of people so far either shorten their sentences or, walk free almost immediately. And it, now these people are back in the community and they're sort of reintegrating. Another thing that we have been doing is sort of taking on some of the more interesting issues relating to marijuana expungement. So the resentencing issue is one thing. Another issue that we've come up against is the question of whether a person who is convicted of possession for sale is convicted of possession of marijuana, which is expungible, or is convicted of selling marijuana, which is not expungible. And so although the statute approved by Arizona voters may seem pretty clear, there's a lot of kind of gray areas that are not really explained in the law that we need to sort of litigate and, ask the courts to decide. So other organizations in the coalition have been referring us cases that get a little bit more complicated and require a little bit more, working up and litigating in the state trial and appellate courts. One thing that we have been able to do much more recently is working with prosecution offices in the state of Arizona to sort of reach a common goal that we both agree should happen. So for instance, with these marijuana resentencings, the state agrees with us that these folks should be resentenced. They just need representation to walk through that process. And we're finding that there is much more of an appetite for criminal justice reform now, such that, county attorneys' offices that historically have been very tough on crime. And when I say tough on crime, I mean, they want lengthy prison sentences for offenses that are not always violent, do not always necessarily require these lengthy sentences. And now, years later, the county attorneys are sort of willing to work with us to get folks with longer sentences either resentenced or get them out on parole or get them out on some sort of supervised release, because they realize that, you know, justice does not always mean throwing someone in jail and, you know, throwing away the key. So I am hopeful, I was about to say confident, I will say I'm hopeful that, you know, we're able to work with prosecution offices more frequently in the future towards a common end. Now, we're not always going to agree with the prosecutors. We're going to litigate some cases. We're going to fight with them on occasion. But I think, you know, both the prosecution office and the clinic want to serve the ends of justice. And when we can agree on what justice is, that's a happy time for everyone. So I'm hopeful that as the clinic evolves, we will be able to do more of that type of work.